Buckle up and brace yourself for the storm ahead as Phase 3 of the housing crash begins, sending shockwaves through the real estate market. The time for inventory panic has arrived, and the impact is set to be unprecedented housing market crash when, after 12 quarters of insane, never-ending price increase, Redfin.com reports that nearly every U.S. buyer is asking that question. 3 years ago, a new buyer could expect to pay around $1,300 a month for the average home. Today, that number has increased to a record high of $2,566, making the housing market more expensive than ever and getting worse every week. The obvious doesn't require a graph or dozens of data points. Everyone is wondering how the bubble will burst and when prices and monthly payments will return to the long-term mean. Right now, our inventory is still well below what was considered normal in the pre-20th century. Since the Fed raised rates in January 2022, the market has been battling restricted availability and affordability. You can see from nearly every graph that prices finally began slowing down and even dropping from January of that year to October. A normal 30-year mortgage went from 3 to 7, which caused monthly payments to erupt from $16.50 per month to $2,500 per month. Just 9 months later, this caused massive affordability issues, slowing demand in a way we had not seen since the early 80s. The Fed essentially shot a hole in demand. For example, last year, at this time, inventory was rising 4% per week, peaking in November. But this year, we're not seeing any bump in inventory. You see, prices will likely stay relatively strong going into the winter, but the story of next year starts to get really interesting when we begin to examine recession data. We know that the U.S. economy is slowing down. You may have heard this repeated over and over for the past 2 years, but today, nobody, not even the most optimistic investors, denies this. Specifically, we would like to see the number of single-family homes for sale rise from 400,000 to 800,000. While rates should remain high and unemployment should rise. The sad truth about home price collapses is that they simply cannot happen without some sort of damage to the job market. So with that said, given the information at hand, how do I see it playing out? Well, as we move through the summer, it is true the market will remain competitive and bubbly. But as the summer cools off, a few important factors will start to change. The dynamics of the markets. Number one is the Fed. There are a lot of people who think that the Fed will pause with rate hikes for the rest of the year. The market consensus seems to align with this belief. But given Powell's background, I think he's well aware of the implications of an early pause. He understands his duty is to break the back of inflation, and so far he's doing his job exactly as planned. But one wrong move, and all of his progress can get wiped away. We saw in the early 80s. What can happen when the Fed blinks and the market calls their bluff? Inflation can quickly spring back up if they don't tighten the screws all the way, and there is emerging evidence to suggest that we haven't reached that phase yet. So if Powell raises one more time in 2023, and at the same time the economy turns in Q4 of this year, we're going to have mortgage rates back above 7% now. As this economic turmoil gets worse, the unemployment rate will surely tick up. This will cause further demand destruction, and the next phase of the crash will begin. You see, back in the summer of 2022, when the Fed originally began tightening the screws and raising the rates, those massive moves in supply were caused by investors fleeing. Today, we still see that investors make up a significant portion of the market, and while many of them pause their buying spree, almost nobody dumped their active inventory. And this is where I think the next step is investors capitulating, not just pausing. We know that most people in today's existing homes have mortgages that are well below 5%. In fact, according to most commonly sourced statistics, it's estimated that 80% of active mortgages have a rate below 5%, which means these people are not selling anytime soon. Even if prices begin to decline, in order for inventory to move up, the supply will have to come from investors who are still holding on to their houses despite a scare in 2022 when this capitulation phase begins. That's when the crash really starts heating up. Then once the ball is firmly on the side of the buyers, the true panic begins for sellers. The fall will become self-reinforcing, with little to no demand. Offers will dry up. Buyers who are aware of falling prices will do what any rational buyer does: wait, and existing investors will be left to compete via massive price reductions. The spiral will continue until a bottom is reached, and the housing crash of 2024 will be the start of a 12-year cycle reversa. With bankruptcies and unemployment at record lows, this type of crash seems out of touch. But we can expect a solid 15 to 20% decline that takes us back to 2021 levels, putting the ball in the buyer's court and allowing for a more open buying experience with reduced competition. As always, please like and subscribe if you liked it, and don't forget to leave a comment on the prediction and what you're seeing in the markets.